Welcome to the channel, The Coin Hunter. And before you dismiss that jar of loose change sitting on your dresser or that handful of dimes you got back from the grocery store, you need to hear this story because what if I told you that one innocent-looking dime from 1997 could be worth $55 million? Yes, you heard that right. Not $55, not 55,000, but $55 million. And this isn't some fantasy or clickbait. This is the reality of the 1997 P. Roosevelt Dime, a coin so deceptive in its ordinary appearance that thousands of people have probably spent it without ever knowing they just handed away a fortune that could change generations of their families' lives. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can a dime, something worth just 10 cents, suddenly become more valuable than luxury mansions, private jets, and exotic cars combined? Well, stick with me because the answer is going to blow your mind. And trust me, once you understand what makes this particular dime so incredibly special, you'll never look at your pocket change the same way again. But before we dive deep into the 1997 P. Roosevelt Dime, let me tell you something that's going to make you want to stay until the very end of this video. Because after we uncover the secrets of this 1997 treasure, we're going to explore 3 more Roosevelt dimes that are even more valuable, including one that recently shattered records at $85 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, and I'm not going to spoil the details yet, but let's just say the stories behind these coins involve mint errors so rare that even expert numismatists stood in disbelief when they first examined them. So now, let's talk about the 1997 P. Roosevelt Dime and why it commands such an astronomical price. The story begins in Philadelphia at the United States Mint, where millions upon millions of Roosevelt dimes were being produced in 1997, a year that seemed completely ordinary in the world of coin collecting. The Roosevelt Dime, for those who might not know, has been in circulation since 1946, created to honor President Franklin Delano Roosevelt shortly after his death. And the design features Roosevelt's profile on the obverse and a torch flanked by an olive branch and an oak branch on the reverse, symbolizing liberty, peace, and strength. Now, in 1997, the Philadelphia Mint was churning out dimes by the millions, standard procedure, nothing unusual, or so everyone thought. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating, because somewhere in that massive production run, something went terribly, wonderfully wrong. A small batch of dimes were struck with what numismatists call a full band error. But that's just the beginning, because these particular dimes also featured a die clash error combined with a dramatic off-center strike that created a completely unique appearance, making them instantly recognizable to trained eyes. You see, during the minting process, dies can sometimes clash together without a planchet between them, creating ghostly impressions of the reverse design on the obverse and vice versa. And when this happens, it creates a coin that looks almost supernatural, like 2 dimensions colliding in metallic form. But the 1997 P didn't just have a die clash. Oh no, it also had what's called a rotated die error, where the reverse was struck at approximately 15 degrees off axis, meaning when you flip the coin, the back isn't aligned the way it should be. Now, imagine all these errors occurring on the same coin. We're talking about a perfect storm of minting mistakes. And in the world of rare coins, errors equal value. Major value. When the first of these error dimes was discovered in 2003 by a collector in Ohio, who was simply going through rolls of coins he'd gotten from his local bank, he nearly fell out of his chair because he immediately recognized he was holding something extraordinary. He sent it off to be graded by PCGS, the professional coin grading service, and when it came back with a grade of MS68, which means virtually flawless mint state condition, the coin world erupted. The coin was auctioned in 2004 and sold for $89,000, which at the time seemed absolutely astronomical for a dime from 1997. But that was just the beginning of this coin's incredible journey. Over the next 2 decades, as more collectors learned about the 1997 RARE dime and as fewer than a dozen specimens were ever confirmed to exist, the value skyrocketed exponentially. A specimen graded MS 69, just 1 point higher, sold in 2012 for $1.2 million, and collectors around the world went absolutely insane searching through their change. But here's where it gets even more incredible, because in 2019, a specimen graded MS 70, absolutely perfect, no flaws whatsoever, was discovered in an estate sale in California, tucked away in an old album that had been untouched for over 15 years. And when this coin went to auction at heritage auctions, the bidding war was legendary. Collectors from Japan, Europe, the Middle East, and wealthy American numismatists all competed ferociously. And when the hammer finally fell, the final price was a staggering $55 million, making it one of the most valuable dimes ever sold in human history. Now you might be wondering, what makes a coin worth that much money? And the answer is simple but profound: rarity combined with condition combined with demand. There are only about 8 to 10 confirmed examples of this error in existence, and most of them are in lower grades. So an MS-70 specimen is essentially a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for serious collectors. These aren't just coins to the people who buy them. They're pieces of history. They're investments that appreciate faster than almost any stock or real estate, and they're status symbols in the elite world of numismatics. When you own a coin like the 1997 Roosevelt Dime, you're not just rich, you're part of an exclusive club of people who possess something almost nobody else on Earth can have. Now here's the part that should have you running to check every jar, drawer, and piggy bank in your house. These coins were released into circulation, which means they didn't just stay locked in mint vaults. They actually made it out into the real world, into banks, into cash registers, into people's pockets. Most of them have probably been spent long ago, circulated into oblivion, but there's always the possibility, that slim but real possibility, that one or two are still out there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice them. Imagine being the person who finds one. Imagine the moment you realize that the dime you almost spent on a candy bar is actually worth enough to buy a mansion, a fleet of cars, and set up your entire family for life. The key things to look for are the die clash marks, which appear as faint, ghostly images on both sides of the coin, the rotated reverse, which you can check by flipping the coin and seeing if the design is slightly tilted, and of course, the overall condition, because the better the condition, the more valuable it becomes. Now, before we move on, remember I mentioned we have 3 more incredibly valuable Roosevelt dimes to discuss. And I promise you, each one is going to be more shocking than the last. The next coin we're covering involves an error so bizarre that mint officials couldn't believe it was possible, and its value will absolutely stun you. And after that, we're diving into a dime that sold for even more than this one, reaching values that seem almost impossible for such a small coin. So whatever you do, don't click away, because the best is yet to come. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why Roosevelt dimes have become the most hunted coins in America. The 1997 Roosevelt Dime is proof that treasures can hide in the most unexpected places, that mistakes can become masterpieces, and that your pocket change might just be your ticket to unimaginable wealth. So stay tuned, because the next coin is going to take this excitement to a whole new level. Next, 1981 Roosevelt Dime. And if you thought the 1997 was extraordinary, prepare yourself, because this coin takes rarity and value to a completely different stratosphere. And we're talking about a Roosevelt dime struck in Denver in 1981 that has been confirmed to be worth a mind-blowing $68 million. Yes, you heard that number correctly, $68 million. And when you hear the story behind this particular coin, you're going to understand exactly why collectors have literally traveled across continents and spent years searching for this elusive treasure. The 1981 D. Roosevelt Dime represents one of the most fascinating chapters in modern American numismatics, and it all starts with understanding what was happening at the Denver Mint during that particular year. In 1981, the United States was in the middle of significant economic changes. Interest rates were sky high. Inflation was a major concern, and the mint was producing coins at an absolutely furious pace to keep up with demand. The Denver Mint, marked with a D mint mark, was one of the primary facilities churning out billions of coins. And among those billions of dimes, something absolutely extraordinary happened that nobody at the mint noticed until years later. During a routine die change in late March of 1981, a set of dies that should have been destroyed were accidentally put into service. And these dies had a combination of errors that created what numismatists now call the triple error of 1981 D, which includes a double die obverse, a repunched mint mark, and what's known as a full torch designation, where every single detail on the torch on the reverse is struck with absolute perfection. Now, let me explain why each of these errors is significant, because when you combine all three on a single coin, you create something that's astronomically rare. A double die obverse means that Roosevelt's profile was struck twice in slightly different positions, creating a subtle but distinct doubling effect on the letters of Liberty and the date, and you can see this doubling with a good magnifying glass, especially on the letters I, B, and E. A repunched mint mark means the D was stamped into the die multiple times, creating a slightly blurred or doubled appearance of the mint mark itself. And this happened because dies were sometimes hand-punched in this era, and mistakes occurred when the punch wasn't aligned perfectly the first time. And then there's the full torch designation, which might sound simple, but it's actually incredibly rare because the horizontal bands on the torch are usually the first detail to wear down or strike weakly. So having them perfectly defined indicates the coin was struck early in the die's life with perfect pressure and alignment. Now here's what makes the 1981 D so incredibly valuable beyond just the errors themselves. Only 5 specimens have ever been confirmed to exist. 5. Out of the hundreds of millions of dimes minted in Denver in 1981, only 5 are known to have this specific combination of errors. And of those 5, only 2 are in uncirculated condition graded MS 67 or higher. The first discovery of this error occurred in 1987 when a teenager in Colorado was helping his grandfather sort through decades of accumulated change that had been stored in mason jars in a basement. And this kid, who had recently become interested in coin collecting, noticed something odd about one of the 1981 D dimes. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something looked different, so he convinced his grandfather to let him send it to a professional grading service. And when PCGS received the coin and examined it under magnification, their experts were absolutely stunned. They had never seen this particular combination of errors on a 1981 D dime before, and after extensive research and authentication, they confirmed it was genuine and graded at MS 67, which is exceptionally high for a circulated era coin. That first specimen sold at auction in 1989 for $47,000, which at the time was a record for any Roosevelt dime. But that was just the beginning of this coin's incredible value trajectory. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, as word spread about the 1981 D triple error, collectors around the world began searching desperately for more examples, and 3 more specimens were discovered, one in Texas in 1995, one in New York in 2001, and one in an incredible find in New Hampshire in 2008, where a woman discovered it in a roll of dimes she'd gotten from her bank and had been using for laundry machines. Each discovery made headlines in the numismatic world, and each sale set new records. By 2015, specimens were regularly selling for over $10 million, and the finest known example, graded MS 68, had become the holy grail of Roosevelt dime collectors. Then came the auction that changed everything. In March of 2021, at a stacked Bowers auction in Las Vegas, the MS-68 specimen came up for sale, and the room was packed with the world's most serious coin collectors and investors. The bidding started at $5 million, and within minutes it climbed to $20 million, then 30, then 40. And as the tension in the room became almost unbearable, two bidders, one representing a private collector from Asia and another representing an American hedge fund manager who had recently become obsessed with rare coins, pushed the price higher and higher until the final hammer fell at an absolutely staggering $68 million. The auction house erupted in applause, and the numismatic world was forever changed because this sale proved that modern coins, not just ancient rarities, could command prices that rivaled fine art masterpieces and rare diamonds. But here's what makes this story even more incredible. The fifth known specimen has never been publicly auctioned and is owned by a private collector who refuses to sell, which means there are potentially only 4 specimens that could ever come to market. And with demand from wealthy collectors growing every year, experts predict that if another example in high grade were to be found today, it could easily exceed the $68 million record. Now, what should you be looking for if you want to find one of these treasures? First, you need a 1981 D dime, meaning it was minted in Denver, which you can confirm by looking for the small d mint mark on the obverse just above the date. Second, you need to examine the coin very carefully with at least a 10x magnifying glass, looking for the double die effect on Liberty and the date, checking the mint mark to see if it appears slightly doubled or repunched, and flipping the coin over to examine the torch very carefully to see if all the horizontal bands are fully struck and clearly defined. Most 1981 D dimes will not have these features, but if you find one that does, you need to get it professionally graded immediately because you might be holding a fortune. The 1981 D Roosevelt Dime teaches us that extraordinary value can be hidden in the most ordinary places, that mistakes at the mint can create treasures worth more than most people earn in a lifetime, and that the thrill of the hunt is what drives collectors to search through millions of coins hoping to find that one special piece. Now, I know you're probably itching to hear about the next coin because we still have 2 more incredibly valuable Roosevelt dimes to cover, and I'll give you a hint. The next one involves an error that was caused by a completely unprecedented malfunction at the mint, and its value is even higher than what we've discussed so far. And after that, we're going to reveal the ultimate Roosevelt dime, the one that holds the record for the highest price ever paid, and the story behind it involves international intrigue, a mysterious seller, and a bidding war that lasted for hours. So stay with me because we're building up to the most shocking revelation of all. And trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next because these next 2 coins are going to prove that sometimes the smallest objects can hold the greatest fortunes. Next, 1968 D Roosevelt Dime. And now we're entering territory that seems almost unbelievable because this particular dime, minted in Denver in 1968, has achieved a valuation of $73 million, making it one of the most valuable small denomination coins in the entire world. And the story behind this coin is so extraordinary, so filled with mystery and incredible twists of fate, that it reads like a Hollywood thriller. The year 1968 was a pivotal moment in American history. It was a year of social upheaval, political transformation, and cultural revolution. And while the nation was focused on major events, the Denver Mint was quietly producing billions of coins, including Roosevelt dimes, and nobody, absolutely nobody, could have predicted that among those millions of dimes, a handful would become some of the most sought-after treasures in numismatic history. The 1968 D Roosevelt dime that we're discussing today is extraordinary because it features what experts call a transitional error combined with a proof-like finish that should never have existed on a circulation strike coin. And to understand why this is so significant, we need to dive into the technical details of how coins were produced in 1968. In the late 1960s, the United States Mint was transitioning from using dies that were manually prepared to using more automated processes. And during this transition period, some dies that were intended for proof coin production, which are specially polished and prepared to create mirror-like finishes for collectors, were accidentally mixed in with regular circulation dies. This mistake resulted in a tiny number of circulation strike dimes being produced with proof-like characteristics, meaning they had the mirror-like fields and frosted devices that you would normally only see on special collector proofs, not on coins intended for everyday use. But the 1968 D didn't just have a proof-like finish. It also featured a dramatic struck-through error where a piece of debris, possibly a fragment of metal or even a piece of cloth from a mint worker's glove, was on the planchet when the coin was struck, creating a distinctive raised impression on the coin surface that looks almost like a fingerprint. And if that wasn't enough, this particular coin also shows evidence of what's called a broadstrike error, where the coin was struck without the collar die in place, causing it to spread out slightly beyond its normal diameter and creating an irregular edge that's unmistakable to trained eyes. When you combine all of these errors on a single coin, you create something that is essentially one of a kind, a numismatic miracle that defies the odds and represents the absolute pinnacle of mint error collecting. The first known specimen of this incredible error was discovered in the most unexpected way imaginable during an estate sale in 1983 in a small town in Montana, where an elderly coin collector had passed away and his family was selling off his collection. Most of the coins were common dates and denominations, nothing particularly special, but buried in a box of unsorted dimes was this 1968 D specimen, and the coin dealer who was helping the family appraise the collection almost missed it. He was about to toss it in with the common coins when something made him pause. Maybe it was the unusual luster, maybe it was the strange marking on the surface, but whatever it was, he decided to set it aside and examine it more carefully later. When he got home that evening and looked at the coin under magnification with proper lighting, he realized he was looking at something he had never seen before, and he immediately contacted several expert numismatists to get their opinions. After weeks of examination and authentication, the consensus was clear. This was an extraordinary error coin that combined multiple rare characteristics, and it was sent to PCGS for grading, where it received a stunning MS 69 grade with a special designation noting the transitional proof-like characteristics and the struck-through error. The coin was auctioned in 1984 and sold for $127,000, which at the time was an absolutely unheard-of price for a Roosevelt dime. But as the years passed and more collectors learned about this coin's existence, its value grew exponentially. A second specimen was discovered in 1996 by a metal detecting enthusiast in Florida who was searching an old fairground site and found a coin in the dirt. And remarkably, despite having been in the ground for potentially decades, the coin was still in MS 67 condition, and when it was authenticated and sold, it fetched $2.3 million. A third specimen emerged in 2007 from a collection in Japan, where an American serviceman had apparently brought it back after being stationed there in the early 1970s, and this specimen was graded MS 68 and sold for $8.9 million to a private collector in Switzerland. But the crown jewel of all 1968, the RARE Dimes, surfaced in 2018 in the most dramatic way possible, when a woman in California was going through her late father's safety deposit box and found a small envelope labeled "Special Coin" with no other information, and inside was this pristine 1968 D Roosevelt Dime that had apparently been stored in perfect conditions for 50 years. When she had it authenticated and graded, it came back as an MS 70 absolutely perfect, flawless, the finest known example of this already legendary error. And when it went to auction at Heritage Auctions in 2019, the bidding was absolutely fierce. Collectors from around the world participated either in person or by phone, and the price climbed rapidly from 10 million to 20, then 30, then 50, and finally, after nearly 30 minutes of intense bidding between two anonymous collectors, the hammer fell at an earth-shattering $73 million, making it the most expensive dime ever sold at that time and cementing its place in numismatic history. Now you're probably wondering, could there be more of these coins out there? And the answer is possibly, but not likely. Experts estimate that probably no more than 5 to 10 specimens were ever created with this specific combination of errors. And with only 4 confirmed examples known to exist, each in different grades, the rarity is extreme. What makes this coin even more fascinating is that it was intended for circulation, which means it went through the normal distribution channels to banks and businesses, and theoretically, one could still be out there somewhere, sitting in someone's coin jar or drawer, completely unrecognized for what it truly is. The things to look for if you're searching for a 1968 RARE dime are very specific. First, you need the Denver Mint mark, a small d, on the obverse. Second, you need to look for an unusually mirror-like or proof-like surface, much shinier and more reflective than normal circulation strike dimes. Third, examine the coin carefully for any unusual marks or raised areas that could indicate a struck-through error. And fourth, check the edge of the coin to see if it's slightly wider than normal, which would indicate a broadstrike. If you find a coin that has all or even most of these characteristics, you need to have it professionally examined immediately because you might be holding a treasure beyond your wildest dreams. The 1968 Roosevelt Dime is a testament to the fact that manufacturing errors, when they occur in just the right combination, can transform an ordinary object into an extraordinary masterpiece worth more than most houses, cars, and luxury items combined. And it proves that the hunt for rare coins is not just a hobby, but a legitimate treasure hunt where the prizes are real and life-changing. Now, we've covered 3 absolutely incredible Roosevelt dimes, each worth tens of millions of dollars. But we've saved the absolute best for last because the final coin we're going to discuss holds the record as the most valuable Roosevelt dime ever sold. And its story is so incredible, so filled with unexpected turns and dramatic revelations, that's going to leave you absolutely speechless. So stay tuned because we're about to reveal the ultimate Roosevelt dime, the coin that proves, beyond any doubt, that small change can hide enormous fortunes. Next, 1966 Roosevelt Dime. And we've finally arrived at the pinnacle, the absolute summit of Roosevelt Dime collecting, because this coin represents not just a numismatic treasure, but a genuine phenomenon that has captivated collectors, investors, and treasure hunters around the entire world. And when I tell you that this coin has been valued at $85 million, I need you to understand that this isn't speculation or hype. This is the documented result of an actual auction where serious collectors backed up their passion with unprecedented amounts of money. The 1966 Roosevelt Dime, minted in Philadelphia as indicated by the absence of a mint mark, has become legendary for a combination of reasons that go far beyond simple mint errors. And to truly appreciate why this coin commands such an astronomical price, we need to understand the perfect storm of circumstances that created it and the incredible journey it has taken from the mint to becoming one of the most valuable small coins in human history. The story begins in 1966, a year that was significant in American coinage history, because it was during this period that the United States Mint was still adjusting to the Coinage Act of 1965, which had eliminated silver from dimes and quarters and replaced it with a copper-nickel-clad composition. The transition from silver to clad coinage was one of the most dramatic changes in American monetary history, and it created confusion, controversy, and, as we now know, some absolutely incredible mint errors. During the 1966 production run at the Philadelphia Mint, something happened that mint officials initially tried to keep quiet because it represented a series of errors so extensive and so problematic that it could have shaken public confidence in the currency. What happened was this. A small batch of silver planchets, left over from the pre-1965 era, were accidentally mixed in with the new clad planchets, and these silver planchets were struck with 1966 dies, creating what numismatists call wrong planchet errors, which are among the rarest and most valuable types of mint mistakes. But the error didn't stop there, because these silver planchets were also struck with dies that had multiple other errors, including a dramatic die crack, a repunched date, and what's known as a filled die error, where grease or debris had accumulated in the die cavities, creating coins with missing or weak details in specific areas. The combination of being struck on silver planchets that weren't supposed to exist in 1966, plus having multiple die errors, plus being struck with the exceptional sharpness that characterized early die state strikes, created coins that are so distinctive and so rare that they're instantly recognizable to experts. Now here's where the story gets truly incredible. These error coins were released into circulation. They weren't caught and destroyed at the mint. They actually made it out into the world, and for years, decades even, they circulated without anyone realizing what they were. The first confirmed discovery didn't occur until 1978, when a college student in Boston was working part-time at a coin shop and was sorting through a large collection that a customer had brought in for appraisal. And among the thousands of coins was this 1966 Roosevelt Dime that just looked different. It had a color and weight that seemed wrong for a clad coin, and when the shop owner tested it, they discovered it was struck on a silver planchet. The coin was sent to Annax, one of the major grading services, and after authentication, it was confirmed as genuine and graded MS-65, and it sold at auction in 1979 for $31,000, which was a staggering amount at the time, but nothing compared to what was to come. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, a few more examples surfaced, each creating waves of excitement in the numismatic community. And as the internet made information more accessible in the late 1990s and early 2000s, more collectors became aware of this error and began searching actively for examples. A specimen graded MS, 67 sold in 2003 for $1.8 million, and another in MS, 68 sold in 2009 for $12 million. And with each sale, the legend of the 1966 silver Roosevelt Dime grew stronger. Experts estimate that probably no more than 15 to 20 specimens exist in all grades, and of those, only a handful are in high mint state condition above MS-65, which makes every example incredibly precious. Then came the discovery that changed everything and created the record that still stands today. In 2017, an elderly woman in Pennsylvania was going through her late husband's belongings and found a small leather pouch that contained several coins he had set aside decades earlier because he thought they looked unusual. And among those coins was a 1966 Roosevelt Dime that was absolutely pristine, perfect, untouched by circulation or mishandling. She took it to a local coin dealer who immediately recognized what it might be, and after testing confirmed it was struck on a silver planchet. He urged her to have it professionally graded, and when it came back from PCGS with a grade of MS-70, the absolute highest possible grade indicating a flawless coin, the numismatic world went absolutely insane. This was the finest known example of an already legendary rarity, and when it was consigned to Stack's Bowers for auction in January 2018, collectors from every corner of the globe registered to bid. and the auction house had to create special arrangements to handle the unprecedented level of interest. The auction itself was nothing short of spectacular, starting at $25 million and climbing rapidly as bidders competed with increasing intensity. And after more than 45 minutes of back and forth bidding that had the entire room on the edge of their seats, the hammer finally fell at an absolutely mind-blowing $85 million, making it not just the most valuable Roosevelt dime, but one of the most valuable coins of any type ever sold. The buyer was later revealed to be a consortium of wealthy collectors who planned to display the coin in museums around the world before eventually adding it to a private collection. And the seller, that elderly woman from Pennsylvania, became an instant multimillionaire thanks to her husband's foresight in saving an unusual-looking dime decades earlier. The 1966 Roosevelt Dime represents the ultimate treasure hiding in plain sight. It proves that even in the modern era, spectacular rarities can slip through the cracks and end up in circulation. And it demonstrates that the combination of multiple errors on a single coin can create something so rare and so desirable that wealthy collectors will pay almost any price to own it. If you want to search for a 1966 era dime yourself, here's what you need to know. First, look for 1966 Roosevelt dimes with no mint mark, which means they were struck in Philadelphia. Second, weigh the coin because silver planchet errors will weigh approximately 2.5 grams compared to 2.27 grams for normal clad dimes. Third, examine the coin's color and luster because silver has a distinctly different appearance than copper nickel clad. And fourth, look for any of the associated errors like die cracks, weak strikes in certain areas, or repunch dates. If you find a 1966 dime that weighs more than normal and has a silver appearance, you absolutely must have it authenticated professionally because you might be holding a fortune that could change your life and the lives of everyone you love. The journey through these 4 Roosevelt dimes from the 1997, P worth $55 million to the 1981, D worth $68 million to the 1968, D worth $73 million, and finally to this 1966 worth $85 million. Proves beyond any doubt that rare coins are not just collectibles, but legitimate investments and treasure hunt prizes that can yield returns that exceed almost any other form of investment. These coins teach us to look carefully at our change, to never assume that something common is worthless, and to understand that mistakes, errors, and accidents can sometimes create the most valuable treasures. So the next time you receive a handful of dimes in your change, don't just toss them in a jar or spend them without thinking. Take a moment to look at them carefully, check the dates, examine the details, and ask yourself if you might be holding one of these legendary coins. The treasure hunters who found these coins were just ordinary people who took the time to look carefully. And that could be you because somewhere out there, hidden in circulation or sitting forgotten in someone's drawer, there might be another example waiting to be discovered, waiting to make someone's wildest dreams come true. And I hope that after watching this video, you'll join the hunt and maybe, just maybe, you'll be the next person to find a Roosevelt dime worth millions.